that didn't know you so well, lads, listening, I suppose, and the soccer public being quite so large. But we'll start tonight, I suppose, with the announcement of Treaty United squad, obviously, on Saturday. And we'll start, Noel, with yourself. Before we get into the specifics of the squad and the actual players signed, 26 players signed. Tommy Barrett probably feels like he's done quite well, obviously, now to sign a squad of 26. What's your take on it, Noel? Squad size, would you be happy with it?
Yeah, well, initially, to be honest about it, I thought that it may well have been too big, particularly that, you don't have a lot of room in this league to be kind of trying people out, and there's also, in my own experience, you don't make a huge amount of changes, particularly if the team is going quite well or you're trying to build a bit of momentum. But I suppose after just tuning in earlier on to Tommy's interview, and he said that they had 17 players in Waterford for various reasons. So I suppose from that point of view, it was probably better to be safe than sorry. And also it does give you the option for internal 11v11 games, which obviously will be important in the next few weeks. The fact that, in fairness to Treaty and Tommy, it can't be that easy to organise pre-season friendlies with most clubs haven't had them organised for a couple of weeks before Treaty were even accepted into the league.
Yeah, in the interview that Noel is referring to, Jason, Tommy cited the fact that obviously, he'll have players that, being in basically an amateur status, he'll have players with work commitments as well. You obviously have the COVID situation right now too, and obviously you will have injuries and suspensions as well to deal with throughout the year. So do you think that going with 26 was probably a necessity early on?
I think it was, Adrian. I take Noel's point, and again, in my own experience, it would be important to have a tight-knit group. And I suppose if you're a tight-knit group, 26 is a big number. Fitness is going to be an issue, that's for sure, with a lot of lads coming into this level for the first time. And I suppose, like Noel said, with COVID, the inability to have group sessions over the last couple of months would definitely have been a factor as well. You both mentioned only 17 in Waterford last night. So I suppose that highlights as well, work and stuff like that. Within the 26, a little bit light in certain areas and a little bit top heavy in other areas. So while it's a good number, maybe been a bit more, I suppose, strategic about it where possible might have been better.
Yeah, Tommy will be reliant on the backroom team as well. Noel, he's brought in Dave Rooney, who will provide, we'll say, a bit of continuity in terms of the club, because he was the women's senior manager last year, and also a bit of continuity for Tommy as well, considering he was vital to Limerick FC with Tommy in 2019 as goalkeeping coach, as well as helping out in this as an assistant. You have Mike McCarthy is helping out there, although he wasn't officially unveiled by the club on Saturday, has been taking parts of the training session. And a very divisive character in terms of football in Limerick has been appointed as strength and conditioning coach, and Mick Sheila. I certainly know he won't mind me saying that, he has been popular and unpopular in certain sections. But if you look at it just by the fact that Mick was involved in the Scully era, Noel, Tommy can also lean on Mick for advice.
Yeah, I suppose so. Now, to be honest with you, I don't know a whole lot about Mick Shields. I wouldn't have managed against him or had much involvement with him. I know he was quite successful at Pike Rovers, and I do remember him on the sideline when I was with Wexford Juice during the Scully area, and obviously has a bit of experience. And I suppose we would have looked at maybe Tommy's last backroom team, if you like, and it did look a bit light on experience. And maybe, for someone to turn to at times that, you probably do need someone that's, been around the block a bit more. And I think the overall, the backroom team is probably a bit more stronger than it was the last time that Tommy managed in the Electricity League.
Yeah, Jason, obviously you would know those people as well from being involved in junior football. Particularly, you also have John Moran is involved as a video analyst there. Excuse me. So even though that the club are obviously not spending a lot of money, particularly, they also have a professional setup in terms of the backroom team, which Tommy will need over the season.
Oh, he will, Adrian, that's for sure. We had a lot of long evenings for Tommy, I'm sure, throughout the season. Personally, I would have liked to see someone maybe with a bit more experience. I know you mentioned Mick Shield there, having a little bit of experience during Pat Scully's time at the club. Mike McCarthy wouldn't have experience at this level. Dave Rooney, the goalkeeper coach, it's very, I suppose, specific. So he'll be dealing with just the goalkeepers. Personally, and not just because he's sitting there, I would like to see someone like Noel involved. Michael Kerley would be another name that would come to mind, who's local. Tommy Lynch, obviously with Jack playing, that might be difficult. But and again, just going back to Mike Shield, like he wouldn't be known for the role that he's brought in for. The roles he would have held in the past, especially with Pike Rovers, he would have been the dominant force, we'll say, for the want of a better description, in the setup that he was involved in. So it'll be interesting to see what parameters he's kept in, I suppose, Adrian, around that role in strength and conditioning.
Yeah, absolutely, because I know that the fact that he was involved with Pat Scully, and he was an assistant to Pat as well, Noel, that, maybe people will say, will he be restricted to just being a strength and conditioning coach? You'd imagine that should be the case if that is his role. But also speaking to him in terms of the strength and conditioning, he obviously knows he's got a big role to play in the next 6-7 weeks, particularly in getting that squad fit. But although, as we say that, he has divided opinions in the past, he is also a man who will follow your mantra of no excuses, and he is very committed to the role and expects the best from his players with no excuses. So that's a positive note.
Yeah, I think it is. And look, people will say, that, obviously he was a dominant force in likes of Pike, but that's up to Tommy now to define his role and make sure that he sticks to his job. And look, we're all well aware that, and Jason has mentioned it already tonight and last week, I mean, fitness is going to be very important. Some of these lads probably are a bit behind the curve in terms of not having games anyway at a mind to get to the level that they need to get. And I think he'll have enough to do besides worrying about anything else. So I think if he's just reminded to make sure that he has the team spot on in terms of their strength and conditioning and fitness, well, then he'll have more than enough to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. And without further ado, to maybe go into the details of the squad, Jason, we'll start with the goalkeepers. You've two signed Shane Cusack, who was also involved in Pat Scully's time and Stuart Taylor's time, but it was always as a backup. Doesn't have a lot of experience in actually playing games at League of Ireland level. Impressed when he went back to Newmarket Celtic at junior level. Has the height in his advantage as a goalkeeper. You obviously have Ty Grein as well. That's a big discussion point, because since Ty has come back from England, he has had a variety of clubs. He was with Galway, Cork and Waterford since he came back, but again was an understudy at all those clubs. Realistically, hasn't played a lot of games. This surely is a perfect opportunity now for Ty Grein in the division below what he's used to playing at, to stake a claim now and reignite his career.
It is, Adrian, and look, you've hit the nail on the head there. Like, as regards both keepers' actual appearances, and that's something to look at, really, I suppose. Look, there would have been the two keepers that I would have went for personally. I made no secret of that, and I'm sure they were Tommy's first choice for that section of the team. Ty Grein, look, there's no pressure on him as such, but this is his opportunity now to I suppose, fulfill the potential that was seen in him from a very young age. We know he spent time at Huddersfield, and as you rightly said there, he's had spells at decent clubs in League of Ireland without being the number one. I know at Waterford he was signed as the number one, and then they actually signed Brian O'Connor, I think it was, Brendan O'Connor maybe, that took the number one jersey and held it, and Ty didn't get in. So, look, it will be an opportunity for Tadhg to stake the claim as the number one. Shane Cusack will be a good deputy, and they'll be vying for that position.
Yeah, absolutely. And Noel, what would you be looking for, I suppose, if you were managing that side from Shane Cusack and Tommy Grein? What particular qualities would you be looking for in the goalkeeping department?
Well, for me, just being able to command the penalty box. Certainly, their distribution has become a huge thing in the game in the last couple of years. But I think that, and I suppose they are at that age because we've been seeing a lot of underage, a lot of the underage keepers. They struggle a bit to kick the ball off the ground or out of their hands, and I think that is an important attribute. But the fact that these guys are maybe in their mid-20s and they certainly should be able to do that, But Tadhg Grein, I saw him play. He came in actually at one stage. He got into the Cork City team and he just struggled a bit. So the fact that he's come down a division, I think you're right. It certainly gives him a chance now to start with a clean slate. It isn't easy to keep two top keepers happy anyway in your squad, and I'm sure Shane is happy to bide his time, and if he gets a chance, he'll certainly take it.
Yeah, we go into the defence now, and this is probably what you were referring to earlier on, Jason, in terms of maybe balance. We have 4 probably recognised left fools in defence. You've got Aaron Fitzgerald, Mark Ludden, Alan Murphy, and Anthony O'Donnell who can all play, and that would be their prominent position. Really, would be left back. I know you had Aaron at Jamesborough in central midfield, but I'm talking maybe at the Electricity League level. You'd have 4 of them. You also have, obviously, you have 3 out-and-out centre-back options as of now in terms of Jack Lynch, Clyde O'Connell and Sean Gearns. Clyde has made no secret of the fact that he would like to play at centre-back. Apparently in the friendly last night, himself and Jack Lynch played quite well. What's your overall opinion on the defensive signings so far?
Yeah, you were right, Adrian. That's exactly what I was referring to when I said top-heavy. A little bit top-heavy on left-backs. And I'm sure he won't mind me saying this, Clyde O'Connell is unproven as a centre-back at this level. And there'll be a huge jump he'll find from the majority of the junior games that he played to this level. And if Tommy is going to persist with a back 4, last night he had a 4-1-4-1 formation. If that's going to be the case, then it's going to be challenging for Clyde to play a full season at centre-back. He might find himself at left-back even during the season, in my opinion. Would Jack Lynch be a natural centre-back at this level is also debatable. Very versatile player. Played at right-back for most of the season last year with Galway. Could certainly do a job as a holding midfield player. Jack is going to be very, very important to the squad. Whether he's an out-and-out centre-back, I'm not too sure about that either. So when you bear both of them in mind, you're looking at Sean Gearns, junior international, as we know, wasn't available last night, but again, is someone that is unproven at this level. And if you're going to be competitive in the games, centre-back and the central area of your defence is pivotal to that. I alluded to it last week that I prefer to see Tommy maybe with 3 centre-backs in his lineup, and that might be something he'll consider throughout the season, because I feel if you had Clyde O'Connell on the left side of a 3 and Jack Lynch at the right side of a 3 centrally in your defence, they'd be a lot more comfortable. But it is an area that's a little bit light in centre-backs. If Charlie Fleming obviously can play right back, and you have a winger, Shane Loth, who could be reverted to a right back throughout the season if needed as well, but a little bit top heavy on left-sided defenders.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Noel, if you look at the squad, really, I suppose Clyde O'Connell and Sean Gearns, who are both being promoted from junior level as such, are the only 2 recognised centre-backs, because Jack Lynch hasn't actually played at centre-back for the last year and a half at Galway. I know you've always said it, and you always had quite of a strong centre-back pairing when you were at Limerick as well. with, you know, the likes of Paul Finucane and Pat Purcell, as Jason referred to. You know, that's where it all starts effectively at centre back. You'd like a strong pairing, but it is an opportunity for the likes of Sean Gearns now, and he's probably going to have to take it, because there is doesn't seem to be on paper an awful lot of options there at centre back.
No, what I wonder is, well, Mark Ludden is a guy that I know that we mentioned at the start, but he's certainly playing the right as well. And I think because of his experience in the league, like this will be his 9th season, there's a possibility, I think, that he could play there. In fairness to, yeah, well, in fairness to Jack Lynch, and I would have said it myself, like even, and you talk about Paul Finucane, when he started with Limerick in his first season, when Tommy Lynch was still the manager, he actually played a good few games at left full before he moved into the middle. And it is true what Jason said about Jack playing at right back, but I think it's no harm for a guy to play maybe a season in the league as a full back before he moves into the middle. There's a little bit more responsibility in there, and I suppose it's nice to gain the experience outside there before you move in. But Sean Gearns, as well, as you know, he has played for the Army as well at the World Cup. Like he's in the Army. I'm sure his conditioning and fitness is really, really good. And he's a real strong, and he's a no-nonsense defender. There's one more guy maybe that possibly could play centre half as well, is Matt Keane, even though he's down for a centre midfielder. I think that there's a possibility that he could play at centre half as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Now that you mentioned Matt Keane, we'll go on to the midfield and whatever about maybe talking about experience and that, you know, midfield obviously being such a crucial area of the pitch. And Jason, you know, I know you were talking about 3-5-2, but just say Tommy was to go with the 4-1-4-1, like you were saying, or maybe his preferred 4-3-3, 4-2, 3-1 type, where he has Sean McSweeney possibly ahead of two midfielders. Your options really are, as we can see it, Joe Collins, Matt Keane, Callum McNamara also there as well, and Ed O'Dwyer, who would be 4 players who you would have to say would be untested at that level. Obviously, we knew that this was going to be the case anyway. I'm not saying that wasn't going to be the case. There's going to be an experience there, but you know, it will be tough maybe for those lads starting off in that area, in such an important area.
It will, Adrian, and look, physicality and height are 2 very important factors when you're speaking about any League of Ireland First Division team in a central area, and that goes for centre backs as well as probably your holding midfielder type players. Sean McSweeney was the 3rd midfielder, if you like, last night. He was just off Dean George and dropping in then out of possession. And giving the lads a hand, and the wingers were pulled in when they needed to be pulled in. And look, that's the tactical side of things, I suppose. You mentioned Callum McNamara, Matt Keane, Joe Collins. And like you said, untried and untested. So it's going to be very, very important that Tommy clarifies their roles for them, simplifies the game for them until they get up to the speed of this level. Unless they're in peak fitness condition, I suppose, the speed of the game will be an issue anyway. And it's really, really important that they know their roles within formations and they know their jobs. And it's kept very, very simple for them, their responsibilities when they're in possession of the ball, when the opposition have it, so when they're out of possession, and then away from the ball when the opposition is in it, when the ball is in a different area of the pitch. Where they're expected to be and what areas they're meant to be in, anticipating where the ball is coming. So as well as the physical side, Adrian, there's going to be a lot of work needed on the tactical side to have these lads ready, I suppose, for 4 weeks' time.
Absolutely, yes. And Noel, in every team, goals are massively important, obviously. That looks right now like it would be probably one of the biggest problems in terms of you always want to have an out-and-out goal scorer in your team, maybe someone who's proven. Obviously, the only way to get proven is to go out and play and score goals. But you have 5 players now that we know are attackers, I suppose. But more so, we have Dean George, who came down last minute from Athlone Town. You've got Adam Foley and Kieran Hanlon. The only issue we have is that Adam Foley and Kieran Hanlon are apparently some way off fitness at the moment, like many, but they're some way off fitness, especially Foley's just come back from injury. Dean George came down. Now, I know Dean George scored a hat-trick against Shelbourne in last season, but outside of that, apparently struggled for goals also as well. That looks right now like it would be Tommy's biggest concern at the start going into the season in terms of position-wise.
Yeah, I think you're right. And like outside the goals, I mean, if you're talking about playing one up top in whatever format, I don't see a guy in that group that can really handle that role, either by his physical strength in terms of hitting the ball up to him that he can hold, or even going in behind the opposition if you're going to play the ball into the channels and get your lone striker on it to hold it up and recycle the ball before the cavalry arrives, if you like. So look, I mean, it's always a conundrum for every team, is, you know, who's going to get the goals, but we'll probably have to wait and see. I don't know, will he stick to that 4-1-4-1? But certainly if we are playing one up top with that group, you can see them struggling a bit for goals.
I'd have to agree, and I know for a fact you agree, Jason. You've been a striker in the League of Ireland. You would have been a type that Noel was talking about. I suppose a bit of a bruiser for up front. You would have been able to hold the ball up, bring other players into play as such. Had a very good aerial ability. That, as Noel said, that doesn't seem to be possible right now with the group that Tommy has available. And if he does persist with one up front, we'll say maybe in a trio or whatever, but having that one striker in a focal point, it may be a struggle. That might open up the opportunity for, as you said, maybe like of a 3-5-2, where you would have maybe a Joel Coustrain up there as a support act as well. Maybe someone lively around the park as well to put players under pressure.
100%, Adrian, and the formation and the tactics have to suit the players that you have. In my experience, it's the players you sign will dictate the tactics you use and the formation that you use. And as yourself and Noel rightly said there, you look at the strikers available on paper. Kieran Hanlon is possibly the only one that you could play up front on his own, and he's way off fitness at the moment. So it's going to be very, very important that Kieran is brought up to speed very quickly, because he might be the only one that can play that role. As I said, if you look at the others, Adam Foley definitely could play in a 2 and run off people. And while I suggested that 3 centre-backs would suit Clyde O'Connell and Jack Lynch and Sean Gearns, putting 2 up front would certainly suit Dean George, Adam Foley, if you were to convert the wingers that Tommy signed. And look, he signed Shane Lowes, Conor Melody, Joel Coustrain and Willie Armshaw, who are out-and-out wingers, in my opinion. So that tells you, I suppose, what's in Tommy's mind. But if you were to revert to a 3-5-2, any of them 4 wingers could play off a target man. But Kieran Hanlon, as I said, is possibly the only target man that's in the group.
Yeah, and you know, to be honest with you, you would have known that this was the biggest concern, Noel, as well, because we know, and it has been well publicised, that Tommy tried to get Conor Ellis back to League of Ireland football. Conor Ellis turned down that move, and the Kern turned him down late in the week last week. That was one that everyone thought was going to happen. So the fact that Tommy was trying so hard for other options will show you that he will be a tiny bit worried about that.
Yeah, listen, he relies on himself, obviously. I suppose the Conor Ellis one was a small bit of a surprise. He's a guy that has intimated that he actually wants to go back and play in the Electricity League. Well, I don't know how many times he thinks he's going to be asked at this stage. You know, I thought it was a good opportunity to come back now. It is a couple of years now since he played in it, and I know he turned down the opportunity to go to Finn Harps a couple of years ago as well. So whether he has that ambition or not anymore is probably is certainly up for debate. I don't know Enda Curran, but it seemed ominously sensible for him to come to Limerick and maybe prove a point to Galway that they should have worked a bit harder to keep him, and he hasn't taken that opportunity either. So there's nothing really that Tommy can do about that, because he has asked him to sign and they have turned down. He only had the 72 hours, whatever. And I suppose he is going to that'll be in the back of his mind, but it'll be one for, for June or July or whatever that window opens again. But in the meantime, he's going to have to rack his brain, for want of a better word, and see, where the goals are going to come from. I suppose it was nice to see the goal come last night from someone as experienced as Grein, like, who, in fairness, looking at it on paper, he's a fantastic signing for that club. It's only 2 years ago that he was in the Shamrock Rovers team, and I remember watching him on TV on a European tie against Swedish opposition. He was very unlucky not to score. So hopefully, like, if he can get the balance right in terms of your midfielders breaking in, I know there's a couple of guys with potential to score. Jason just mentioned Willie Armshaw there. He's been very, very quick and has an eye for goal. Obviously not physically the biggest, but they're guys that might come on or impact in a game. They mightn't start in a game, but come on in the last 15 or 20 minutes when there's a goal needed, or if it's 0-0, and maybe just get them over the line. But it's hard to see them maybe score 2 or 3 or 4 goals in a game. So they got to make sure that, and we've mentioned already, that they're really, really sound at the back.
Yeah, speaking of ambition that Noel mentioned there, Jason, we were disappointed ourselves with the fact that 2 prominent junior players turned down Tommy last week when he definitely asked them to sign for the team. That would have been disappointing. There was also a few junior players in Limerick that actually turned down the chance to go to the trial and the training session. So, you will hear a lot of people saying they would like to see more junior players from Limerick playing, but it's easy to maybe sit in an armchair and not know the information like that Tommy had went and asked certain players. So were you disappointed to see that those players, and 2 of them in particular, had went to the trial, so obviously had an intention of signing? It was obviously disappointing to see them turn down the chance then.
I was there, and then just before we move off the strikers point, not only is scoring goals a very important part of that, but holding the ball up and giving your defence a breather when you're under pressure is another very important aspect of the striker's role. And that's something that's going to need to be incorporated, whoever plays up front. So not only scoring goals, but alleviating pressure that they may be under. Back to your point about lads turning down the opportunity. Look, if lads were asked and they turned down flat not to go to the trials, that they didn't want to be involved, then that's totally understandable. That their mind made up for whatever reason, and they didn't waste anybody's time. Lads that went to the trial and then turned it down would be a little bit more worrying for me, Adrian. Because if they went to the trial game, then he obviously had an interest in signing. If they were then offered forms, which I know a couple were, and they turned it down, then I suppose that opens up the debate on why. They were interested, they got the opportunity, and then they didn't take it. But look, overall, you look at the squad from a selfish point of view, from a proud Limerick City man, I would like to see more Limerick City-based players in it. I understand Tommy's position. He offered them forms, offered them contracts, whatever way you want to describe it, and they didn't take it. But as I said, lads that attended the trial and didn't sign, then maybe you've got to look at what went on there. Maybe it was just last minute and a bit rushed. But there's obviously a reason why they didn't take the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And on a positive note, a more positive note, Donald, first friendly last night behind closed doors, played Waterford FC under Waterford's new manager, Kevin Sheedy. A 1-1 draw, as you both mentioned already. Joel Constrain scored the first goal for the senior men's side. It was definitely a hugely positive first night.
Yeah, I think so. You wouldn't read a huge amount into the actual results of you very seldom see a high scoring pre-season game, and in general they are between Premier sides and First Division sides. So whichever division you're in, the manager in the First Division team is obviously delighted to get a draw, and the Premier manager, he might be too disappointed, but that he can turn that into positive during the week, in terms of driving his group on. I think in terms of treaty, I think it was good that they got a point. It'll certainly give them a bit of a bit of positivity around. There was a number of players that we may feel probably will start the first game. They weren't there last night. So from that point of view, it was good as well. As far as I know, they have an internal game on Saturday in the Marcus Field, and they're due to play at Lone, I think, maybe Monday or Tuesday night. So obviously the guys who didn't play in Waterford, I'm sure will be involved there. So, another positive result there. All those things are important, but I think the most important thing is that guys are getting a bit of match fitness and they're getting to know each other, the little intricacies of what guys do on the pitch. And those things are so important in those bigger games that are coming down the tracks.
Yeah, it was a great game to get as well, Jason, considering, there was a worry that might be the only game that Limerick might get, or they might only be able to play internal games. So that was a big plus. And obviously they've Athlone coming up as well. So, at least we've had at least two pre-season friendlies, as well as grueling sessions behind closed doors as well.
Oh, definitely, Adrian. And look, last night was hugely positive for the lads. As Noel said, the result, while you can't read too much into it, wasn't a heavy defeat, and that's the most important thing. It's something to build on. Not losing games is a good habit to get into, and it was important that it got off to a good start. The focus was on them, albeit from afar, because media and supporters weren't allowed in. But as you could see from the activity on the Twitter page, there was great interest in the game. Everyone was delighted to see a goal scored, and Joel Custrain, a former Carbery United player, to get that goal was fantastic. The game was played on Astro, so I'm sure that suited the Limerick lads. And I was speaking to a good friend of mine, Martin Dunphy, involved with Waterford, last night after the game, and he was very impressed with Limerick, with Treaty, I should say, with Treaty. But yeah, look, a fantastic start. You mentioned that Lone, the more games they can get against quality opposition, the better. Well, it's not ideal because they're going to be playing at Lone during the season. The situation they're in, they can't be turning down any games. But yeah, very positive start and delighted for them.
Yeah, you also pulled a rabbit out of the hat for us, Jason, last night through your Waterford contacts to get the photo of the Waterford Crystal piece that was presented to Tommy Barrett from Kevin Sheedy. So it was great to see that. It was a nice gesture as well from Waterford.
It was, as I mentioned there, Martin Dunphy. He's kind of a local man who runs the club on behalf of the powers down there, and look, a fantastic servant to Waterford football at every level over the years. And we were speaking over the weekend, and he mentioned it to me that it was his idea to source some Waterford Crystal and make the presentation to Treaty to mark the occasion. So speaks volumes for Martin Dunphy and for Waterford United.